My adoptive parents only brought me in to boost their son's grades while hiding his abuse. So I exposed their years of fraud and tore down their fake image in the most devastating way possible. I still remember the first time I saw the Whitlocks' house. It looked like something off a brochure, all brick and bay windows and a porch swing that actually swung in the breeze. I should have felt lucky. That's what the caseworker said. Anyway, my name's Keaton. I was 12 when they adopted me. I had one duffel bag, no pictures, no keepsakes. Just a file that said quiet, compliant, good in school. I guess that's what they were looking for. Mr. Whitlock was a dentist. Mrs. Whitlock didn't work. She said she focused on curating the home environment. They had money. Nice cars, nice shoes, even the dog wore a vest with its name embroidered on it. And then there was their son, Mason. He was my age, maybe 2 inches taller, with the same dark brown hair and same pale skin. We even had similar teeth, which Mrs. Whitlock liked pointing out. It's uncanny, she'd say. You boys could be twins. At first, I thought she meant it as a compliment. The first couple days were calm. Awkward, but calm. Mason showed me around the house. Where to put my shoes. What snacks were off limits. He didn't smile much, but I figured he was just adjusting too. Then, on the 4th night, it started. I beat him at some racing game on the PlayStation. Barely. The screen showed my car crossing the line just ahead of his. I smiled. Good game, man. That's when he punched me. No warning. Right in the thigh. Don't gloat, he said, like I'd broken some unspoken rule. I sat there stunned, pressing my hand against the ache. Mason just went back to clicking through the menu like nothing happened. Over the next week, it got worse. He jabbed me in the ribs for no reason, kicked my chair under the dinner table, elbowed me in the back when we passed in the hallway. All when no one was looking. The only time it happened in front of the Whitlocks, he smirked afterward like it was some kind of test. I had a bruise blooming across my hip from being shoved into the kitchen counter. Mrs. Whitlock noticed. What happened there? She asked, eyes narrowing at the way I was limping. Mason hit me, I said, voice flat. He looked straight at her and shrugged. Impulse control. Sorry. She actually laughed. Boys will be boys, she said. Keaton, you're so resilient. Such a strong little guy. Strong? I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I just nodded. That's what they wanted. From then on, it was open season. Mason didn't bother hiding the hits anymore. When I told Mr. Whitlock he'd punched me in the stomach, the man didn't even flinch. Just keep your distance, he said. You're older now. You can handle it. That's when I realized something ugly. They didn't adopt me because they wanted another son. They adopted me because Mason needed something to hit that wasn't a wall. And I was the wall. It didn't take long to figure out school was the only place I had any control. While Mason coasted through his classes, I started picking things up fast. Math made sense. Science was easy. English came naturally, especially essays. I'd sit at my desk and feel something shift, like the world finally made sense when I could put it into neat little answers. I started getting A's. Quietly. Carefully. At first, I hid my report cards under my mattress. The idea of Mrs. Whitlock seeing them made my stomach twist. But hiding them didn't work for long. One day in early November, she waved a letter in my face with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You got straight A's, she said, her tone almost accusing. What a surprise. I braced for whatever was coming next. But instead of scolding me or warning me not to outshine Mason, she clapped her hands together. This is perfect, she said. Absolutely perfect. The next day, she pulled me into the den. Mason was already there, slumped in a chair and picking at his nails. Here's the thing, she said, crouching in front of me like we were teammates. Mason struggles with test taking. It's not his fault. His brain just operates differently. But you're naturally gifted, aren't you? I didn't answer. You boys look nearly identical, she continued, smiling like she'd solved a riddle. Same height, same face. So, why not level the playing field? I blinked at her. You mean, take his tests? It's just standardized stuff, she said quickly. The teachers barely pay attention during those sessions. All you have to do is show up and write like Mason. You'll be helping the family. Isn't that what you want? Mason didn't look at me. Just muttered, try not to screw it up. I wanted to say no. I should have said no. But I didn't. All I could think about was the group home I came from, the cracked walls, the overcrowded bunk beds, the staff who rotated in and out so fast you never learned their names. If I said no, they'd probably send me back. And this place, as twisted as it was, had food. A bed. A door that locked. So I said, okay. And just like that, a new version of my life started. I'd go to school early on Mason's test days, head to the assigned room, and bubble in answers under his name. Then I'd go back to being Keaton, the quiet, average kid who got mostly B's, struggled in group work, and never raised his hand. The teachers started praising Mason's sudden academic comeback. Said he was finally living up to his potential. Mrs. Whitlock beamed at every compliment. Mr. Whitlock started taking Mason out for celebratory dinners. No one asked how I was doing. Mason's beatings didn't stop. If anything, they got more strategic. But now, there was something different behind his eyes, a smugness. A power. He knew I couldn't fight back. Not without losing everything. At night, I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, repeating one thought like a prayer. Just get through the year. Just survive. Because I wasn't Keaton anymore. I was Mason's mask. And masks don't speak. They just stay on and keep smiling. By winter break, Mason had gotten smart about where he hit me. No more black eyes or bruises on my arms. That was too visible. Too risky. He started going for the ribs. The stomach. Soft spots that hurt like hell but didn't leave anything obvious. I'd wince every time I twisted to grab a book or bent down to tie my shoes. But I never said a word. He knew I wouldn't. Because that was the deal. I wore the mask, took the hits, kept quiet. In return, I got to stay. Meanwhile, Mason started collecting the rewards. One afternoon, he came home waving a set of motorcycle keys. Dad says if I keep it up, I can ride it solo by summer, he bragged. I nodded like it didn't bother me. Like I hadn't written the essays that got him those grades. Like I hadn't sat in that cold testing room for hours pretending to be him while he skipped class to hang out with his friends. A few weeks later, he got a brand new phone, the top-tier model, still in the plastic. I was using one of Mr. Whitlock's old hand-me-downs with a cracked screen and a battery that died by noon. That night at dinner, Mrs. Whitlock handed Mason a slice of cake and kissed his forehead. You've really turned a corner, she said proudly. We're so proud of how far you've come. I didn't even get a glance. The worst part wasn't the silence. It was watching teachers fawn over Mason's growth. One of them, Mr. Larson, English, called him a natural voice. He was referring to an essay I wrote. It was about grief, about feeling invisible. I remember staying up until 2 in the morning crafting it line by line. Mason turned it in without changing a single word. During class, he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and said he thought most books were boring. I prefer movies, he said. Less reading. Mr. Larson laughed. Well, even so, your writing speaks volumes. I sat there, biting the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. A month later, the Whitlocks threw a party. Something casual, just family and a few of Mason's friends. I wasn't really invited, but I hovered by the stairs, half out of sight, listening. Someone asked Mason how he turned things around. How he went from barely passing to top 10 in the class. He laughed and said, guess I finally decided to stop being lazy. Everyone laughed with him. I sat in the shadows gripping the railing, my nails digging into the wood. That was when I tried to take a swing back. The next week, I intentionally tanked one of Mason's history tests. Answered half the questions wrong. Left a few blank. The next morning, at exactly 3:17 a.m., he woke me by pulling me out of bed and slamming me into the floor. He pressed a knee into my ribs, leaned in close, and whispered, don't ever do that again. Then he punched me once in the stomach. Hard. I could barely breathe for hours. The next test? I aced it. He didn't even say thank you. That's when I knew this wasn't just cruelty. This was craft. This family wasn't careless. They were calculated. And every time I tried to fight back, they just tightened the noose. By spring, I started keeping secrets of my own. I waited until everyone was asleep, then snuck into the bathroom and peeled up my shirt. Purple bruises bloomed across my ribs like storm clouds. I took a photo with Mason's old phone, the one they'd given me when he got an upgrade. Then I hid the image in a folder disguised with the name Mason's GPA wins. I figured no one in that house would ever be dumb enough to open a file about school. Over the next month, I added more. Photos of swelling. Video clips from my bedroom mirror where I whispered what had happened that day. One night, I even caught audio of Mason muttering, you screw this up again, and I'll break your damn fingers. I kept that one buried under layers of fake schoolwork folders. I didn't know what I was building, maybe insurance, maybe evidence, maybe just a record that I existed. But I wasn't going to let them erase me completely. At school, I started lingering near Ms. Draper, my English teacher. She was sharp, a little no-nonsense, but she paid attention. Once, after I stayed late to clean up books, she paused and said, you're quiet, but you write like someone who's seen things. I almost told her. The words sat right there, pressing at the back of my throat. But all I said was, thanks. A week later, I finally did speak. I asked if I could talk to her after class. She shut the door and leaned against her desk, arms crossed, waiting. I think something bad is happening at home, I said. She didn't say anything right away. Just gave me this look, the kind you give someone on the edge of a cliff. Then she asked, are you in danger? I don't know, I said. It's not visible. They're careful. She nodded slowly. Whose are they? Before I could answer, the bell rang. I froze. She handed me a hall pass and said, if you ever need to talk more, I'll be here. But be careful. People like the Whitlocks, they know how to hide. Her eyes told me what she didn't say. She believed me. At home, things shifted. One day, I came back from school and my journal was missing. It was a blue notebook I kept hidden behind the bottom drawer of my desk, filled with pages of what Mason had done, what he'd said, dates, times, everything. I tore the room apart. Nothing. At dinner, Mrs. Whitlock was slicing a roast when she looked up and said casually, "You should be more careful with your things." She was holding the carving knife like it was part of the conversation. "I lost a notebook," I said, testing her. "Did you?" she asked, smiling faintly. "Maybe it's time you stopped writing fiction and focused on real life." 3 days later, the journal was returned, but every page had been ripped out and shredded. They left the cover on my bed, like a trophy. The next day, Mr. Whitlock installed security cameras in the kitchen, hallway, and living room. For safety, he said. I knew better. It wasn't safety. It was surveillance. They wanted to know what I was doing, what I was planning. And they had every reason to be afraid, because I wasn't alone anymore. That week, I bumped into Jordan in the library. He was the only friend I had left, if you could even call it that. We sat on opposite ends of the same lunch table most days. He once gave me an extra granola bar without saying a word. I scribbled 4 words on a piece of notebook paper, folded it twice, and slid it under his book. "Help me. Please now." He read it, looked at me, nodded once. And just like that, for the first time in months, I felt less alone. The Whitlocks had built a cage, but I just found a crack in the wall. Jordan showed up at my front door the next day, holding a textbook and pretending to return homework notes. Mrs. Whitlock opened the door with her usual strained smile. "Keaton's a little busy," she said. "I won't be long," Jordan replied, all polite and innocent. She glanced at him, then back at me, weighing something. 10 minutes, she said, and walked off toward the kitchen. As soon as we got to my room, I locked the door. My hands were shaking. "Are you okay?" Jordan whispered. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm getting there." I pulled out an old USB stick I had hidden inside a hollowed-out marker. "Everything's on here. Photos, recordings, the whole setup with the grades. I've been saving it all." Jordan looked at it, then back at me. "You want me to keep it?" "I want you to back it up. Hide it somewhere they can't touch." He nodded, pulled out his laptop, and started transferring the files. "I'll encrypt it. Label it as game mod files. No one will open it." I watched the progress bar climb. "I also found someone," I said quietly. "Someone who used to live here." Jordan looked up. "Like, before you?" "Yeah. His name's Trey. I found him through an old foster care forum. He's in a group shelter 20 minutes from here. We arranged to meet him the next day after school. I told the Whitlocks I was staying late for tutoring. They didn't even blink. Probably figured I was too scared to try anything. Trey was 17 now. Thin, wiry, eyes like someone who hadn't slept in months. When he saw me, he flinched a little, not out of fear, but recognition. "You're in the house," he said. I nodded. "I think you were, too." He glanced around the shelter common room before sitting down. "How bad is it?" "Strategic," I said. He nodded like he knew exactly what I meant. We talked for an hour. He told me everything. How the Whitlocks used him to boost Mason's middle school grades. How Mason broke his arm with a wrench when Trey refused to hand over a test. How Mrs. Whitlock convinced CPS he was violent and unstable, and how he was shipped off to a temporary placement without warning. "I kept the x-rays," he said. "And I still have the email she sent me after they kicked me out, pretending to wish me well, but accidentally CCing Mason's school principal." He dug into a worn backpack and pulled out a folder, thin and folded in half. Inside were copies of the scans, the email, even a faded photo of his cast with the name Mason carved into the plaster. "You're not crazy," he said. "They do this. They've done this." I scanned everything into Jordan's laptop that night. Every page. Every image. By the end of the week, Jordan had backed everything up on multiple drives, one hidden in the sole of my shoe, one in his locker, and another uploaded into a private cloud account disguised as a gaming server. For the first time, we had proof. Not just stories. Evidence. That weekend, while Mason was out with his friends, I slipped into his room and took photos of his awards. The plaques, the certificates, all bearing his name, built on my work. We matched those dates to emails, report cards, and login metadata I had stored from my school account. It all lined up. Keaton did the work. Mason got the praise. And the Whitlocks? They made sure no one ever looked too closely. Until now. The pieces were in place. Jordan was in. Trey had nothing left to lose. And I was done being silent. The Whitlocks had built their lie like a mansion with locked gates and glass walls. But we were already inside. And we were lighting matches. It started with a question. Mr. Larson, my English teacher, stood at the front of class holding a printout of Mason's award-winning essay, the one I'd written. "Mason," he said slowly, "could you walk us through your opening metaphor? The one about language being scaffolding for grief." I loved that line. Mason blinked. The silence stretched. I watched from the next row, head down, pretending to write. Mason scratched his head. "I don't remember writing that exactly. Maybe I just, free wrote and forgot?" Mr. Larson didn't push. He just nodded and moved on. But I caught it, the pause, the flicker of suspicion in his eyes. The next week, it happened again. A history teacher asked Mason to explain his position from a recent essay on industrial labor reform. Mason made a joke about unions and then tried to steer the conversation toward football. It didn't work. By early May, Miss Draper had pulled me aside again. "Have you ever helped Mason with his writing?" she asked casually. I shrugged. "Sometimes." She studied me for a long moment. "If you ever need someone to talk to." I'm not afraid of the Whitlocks. That same week, I started noticing teachers whispering in the break room before first period. "Mr. Larson, Ms. Draper, even Coach Voss." One of them printed something from the staff room and slid it into a folder labeled Academic Review. The cracks were spreading. Then came the family barbecue. The Whitlocks like to host these once a year, a showy suburban event with coordinated tablecloths, catered ribs, and string lights they pretended to hang up themselves. The whole extended family came. Neighbors, Mason's friends, even his grandparents, the Whitlocks' money source and emotional image consultants. Halfway through dinner, Mason's grandfather set down his fork and said, "Heard about your big English award, Mason. That essay, the grief one. Can you recite a bit of it?" Mason looked like someone had unplugged him. I don't remember it word for word." The grandfather frowned. "Strange. That kind of line usually sticks." Mrs. Whitlock jumped in smoothly. "Mason's been so busy. Finals and whatnot." But it was too late. The seed had been planted. That night, Jordan and I uploaded the next batch of files. I labeled them Whitlock_sequence. Zip. Inside, screenshots of school submissions with timestamp data, the essay drafts in my Google Drive, and the raw audio file of Mason's threat from months ago. Jordan burned a second copy onto a drive disguised as a keychain. "I'm sending the backup to Ms. Draper," he said, "but anonymously. We'll keep our names out of it for now." I nodded. At home, I started sleeping with my shoes on, USB still hidden in the sole. I made a second fake login on my school account, syncing files to the cloud under the name M_Whitlock_achievements. I knew they'd search eventually. I wanted them to find something real. They had built their legacy on my silence. But now my silence had structure, storage, strategy. And when it fell, it would fall all at once. It happened during lunch. Mason's girlfriend, Claire, stood in the middle of the cafeteria holding a printed copy of the grief essay, the one Mr. Larson kept referencing, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "This isn't yours. I know who wrote it." You could have heard a pin drop. Claire stared at him, shaking with anger. "You said you were working on this for weeks, but it's all over Keaton's writing folder. You copied it. You lied." Mason just stood there, frozen. Then she dropped the paper and walked out. I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't breathe. But inside, something lit up like a fuse. That afternoon, I found out Mrs. Whitlock had emailed the school claiming parental rights to academic materials, demanding that Mason's and my records not be shared with outside parties. She also showed up at the principal's office, insisting she be listed as a parent liaison for all my extracurriculars. By the next morning, I was dropped from the yearbook committee, then the writing club. Then I was told my SAT registration had a documentation issue that needed resolving, even though I'd registered with my real name months ago. Jordan pulled me aside. "They're trying to shut you down." I knew. That was their move. Suffocate, isolate, erase. Mason didn't say anything at school that day. But when we got home, he cornered me in the garage. "I don't know what you're trying to prove," he hissed. "But if you think this ends with you winning, you're dumber than I thought." He shoved me hard into the dryer, then punched me once, right under the ribs. But this time, I was ready. I hit record the second I heard him coming. The whole thing, the threat, the hit, the way he called me a parasite he never asked for, all of it went into my pocket recorder, tucked inside the lining of my hoodie. That night, I added the audio file to the archive. I named it Parasite_proof. MP3 inch. The next day, Mrs. Whitlock cornered me at breakfast. "You'll be taking Mason's SATs," she said, sliding a folder toward me. "We've registered you under an alternate ID. Don't worry, it'll be seamless." My stomach dropped. This wasn't a fake essay or a quiet grade swap anymore. This was fraud. Real, federal offense, ruin your life kind of fraud. I looked at the folder but didn't open it. "You'll do this," she said, sipping her coffee, "because you owe this family. Because without us, you'd still be in a group shelter, probably stealing snacks to survive." I didn't answer. Just stared at the folder as the plan formed in my head. If they were going to risk prison, they could go down alone. Because I was done being the one they threw into the fire. Now I was the match. The school's annual honor assembly was a big deal. Parents came in press suits, teachers wore their best smiles, and the gym transformed with folding chairs, balloons, and a borrowed sound system that always screeched once before settling. Mason was set to receive 2 awards that day, one for academic excellence and another for a leadership through adversity essay. My essay. I sat near the back, sandwiched between two other kids with no family in attendance. I'd gotten used to that spot. Out of sight, out of mind. Until now. When they called Mason's name for the first award, he walked up slow, smug. The same walk he used when he scored a cheap goal in PE and waited for people to clap. Mrs. Whitlock clapped the hardest. I waited. Then they called him again. For the essay. He stood at the podium with a copy of my words in hand. I stood up. My voice cut through the gym like a snap in a silent room. I have a question. Every head turned. Mason froze. Teachers at the front table exchanged looks. Mr. Larson's eyes went wide. Ms. Draper stood halfway out of her seat. I just want to know, I said clearly, what the school's policy is on test impersonation and academic fraud. Specifically, when one student takes exams and writes essays under another's name. Gasps rippled through the room. Mason's face drained. His hand holding the paper shook just slightly. Mrs. Whitlock stood up. Keaton, sit down this instant. But I didn't. Mr. Whitlock looked like he was calculating how fast he could get to me. I turned to the crowd. I have records. Timestamped writing drafts. Photos. Audio. Copies of Mason's assignments, compared with the original files I wrote. The principal stepped toward the mic. Keaton, let's handle this in private. I looked straight at Mason. Tell them who wrote the essay. He didn't say a word. Then came the buzz. Phones lighting up all over the auditorium. One after another, heads dropped, screens checked, whispers ignited. Because Jordan had just uploaded everything. To the school's shared drive. To the staff Google folder. To the Whitlock neighborhood Facebook group. The first file was titled, fraudlog_KK Whitlock. Zip. Inside, screenshots, documents, audio clips, including Mason saying, "You screw this up again, and I'll break your damn fingers." Mrs. Whitlock pulled out her phone, frantically typing. A few rows up, a teacher muttered, "Oh my God," loud enough for others to hear. Then the school's Wi-Fi started to crawl. Phones buzzed nonstop. Jordan uploaded Trey's video last. Trey, sitting in a hoodie in the group shelter's rec room, voice calm but raw. "My name is Trey. I lived with the Whitlocks before Keaton. Mason broke my arm with a wrench. I have x-rays, emails, the whole thing. They used me to fake grades, just like they're using him. They destroyed my life." Silence. Then shouting. The principal called for an emergency meeting. Ms. Draper escorted me out of the gym like she'd been waiting to do it for months. Mason stood there, shell-shocked, clutching a sheet of paper with words he didn't write, while the world around him caught fire. The Whitlocks scrambled. Mrs. Whitlock started pushing the unstable foster kid narrative online within hours. She posted that I was dangerous, ungrateful, fabricating stories to get attention. Mr. Whitlock called it a targeted smear campaign. Didn't matter. Jordan countered with timestamps, files, cloud backups. Trey's testimony circulated fast, too fast to stop. By nightfall, school administrators were emailing parents. CPS opened a new file. And the Whitlock's name, once golden, had started to rot in real time. The illusion was gone. And the truth? The truth had teeth. The fallout came faster than anyone expected. It started with Mason's grandparents. 3 days after the honor assembly, they requested a private conversation with him at their home in Lakewood, the same pristine house where we used to spend holidays pretending everything was perfect. Mason didn't want to go, but Mrs. Whitlock insisted. I found out what happened from Jordan, who got it from Claire, who heard it from someone's aunt who cleaned for the Whitlock's neighbor. You know how stories fly when reputations are burning. Apparently, Mason's grandfather laid out 2 piles of documents on the coffee table, one labeled 8th to 9th grade, the other 10th to 12th grade. Handwriting samples. Vocabulary usage. Sentence structures. Then he asked one question. Which ones are actually yours? Mason panicked. Said the school was lying, that I'd forged everything, that I was jealous. But when they pressed, when they told him they'd already reviewed the school portal and digital footprints and spoken privately to Mr. Larson, he broke. Right there, in the house with the crystal vases and the antique clocks and the picture-perfect wedding portraits on the mantel, Mason confessed. He admitted to the test fraud, the plagiarism, the abuse. Said it had started as a one-time favor, then spiraled. Said I liked helping and that Mrs. Whitlock managed everything. He didn't mention the bruises or the threats. Of course, cowards rarely confess to those parts. But it didn't matter. The grandparents heard enough. Mrs. Whitlock tried to control the narrative. Called it a temporary emotional breakdown. Said Mason was misunderstood, that I was damaged, that Jordan was a hacker. Her words, not mine. But the mask had already slipped. At a follow-up family dinner, one final PR push to hold things together, Mason's grandmother asked him to explain his grief scaffolding metaphor again. He couldn't. That's when Mrs. Whitlock snapped. She slammed her wine glass down and turned on Mason right there at the table. You ruined it, she hissed. All of it. We had a system. Mason flinched like he'd been slapped. Mr. Whitlock didn't say a word. Just poured himself another drink and stared out the window. Jordan told me the grandparents left early. Quietly. Politely. With that cold, cut you off in the will kind of grace only old money knows how to pull off. The next day, they made 3 phone calls. First to the school board, to formally request an ethics investigation. Then to Child Protective Services. And last, to my caseworker. They didn't say much, just that I'd be transferring to a new placement immediately. Jordan's family offered before the Whitlocks could say a word. My social worker accepted. Within 48 hours, I was out. No bags searched. No long goodbye. Just a silent walk through the house I'd been used in, my shoes crunching on the same tile where Mason once kicked me across the floor. I didn't look back. The Whitlocks are under investigation now, not just for child abuse, but for educational fraud. Falsified identities on SAT registrations. Manipulated foster care reports. Misuse of foster payments. The money they claimed went toward clothing and support had been funneled into Mason's motorcycle, phone upgrades, and a backyard deck remodel. They're also facing a tax audit. Apparently, if you claim a child as a dependent and report him as emotionally challenged to get a medical deduction, there needs to be, well, medical documentation. Oops. As for Mason, colleges pulled their offers. Every single one. One even emailed him directly to say they were deeply disturbed by the allegations. He hasn't been back at school since. The empire his parents built, neat, manicured, gold-plated and fraudulent, collapsed with 1 confession, 2 withdrawals, and an anonymous Google Drive link. Funny how quickly a castle crumbles when it was built on someone else's back. The first morning I woke up at Jordan's house, I didn't flinch at the sound of footsteps in the hallway. No one slammed my door open. No one whispered threats through the wall. No one told me to hide my bruises before school. I just got up. Jordan's mom made waffles. His dad offered me orange juice and asked if I liked horror movies. I didn't know how to answer at first. Not because of the question, but because no one had asked me something without expecting a favor in return in a long, long time. That was the beginning. Living there felt like defrosting. Slow, painful in places, but real. I met with school board officials twice. Both times, I brought copies of the files, the real ones, not the disguised versions. Ms. Draper sat beside me during the second meeting. She didn't say much, just squeezed my shoulder when it was over and told me, "I'm proud of you." Trey testified by phone. His voice cracked a few times, but he got through it. He's been moved to a safer placement now, and we still text sometimes. Mostly dark jokes. The kind you make when you've both seen the inside of the same monster. The Whitlocks? They packed up and left town within 3 weeks. No goodbye letters. No denials. No lawsuits, not yet. Anyway, just gone. Word is, they're restructuring their life in a gated community 2 states over. Mason tried applying to trade schools under a different name, but people talk. And screenshots travel faster than transcripts. He's not getting in anywhere. The school board launched a full review of their foster student oversight policies. Background checks were updated. One principal quietly resigned. Another administrator was reassigned. When the local news ran the story, they kept my name anonymous. But people figured it out. Suddenly, teachers I barely knew were stopping me in the hallway saying things like, "I'm so sorry," and "we should have known." Maybe they should have, but it didn't matter anymore, because I had my name back. And with it came offers, real ones. 2 colleges reached out directly, based on recommendations from teachers who'd seen my work under Mason's name. They asked me to submit my portfolio under my own. When I did, one school wrote back with a scholarship. Full ride. My valedictorian speech, which I delivered under my name, in my voice, in my own carefully chosen suit, didn't thank the Whitlocks. Didn't talk about struggle for sympathy. I talked about systems. About how some families look picture perfect until you zoom in. About how kids in the system don't need rescuing. They need protection, verification, real support. I talked about masks. About how sometimes the brightest student in the room isn't the one in the spotlight, but the one sitting in silence because no one's listening. The gym was quiet when I finished. And then they stood. Not everyone, but enough. Jordan's mom cried. Ms. Draper clapped until her palms turned red. Even Mr. Larson teared up. I'm headed to college this fall. I haven't fully decided if I'll major in education policy or literature. Maybe both. But I know this. I will never let someone else take credit for my voice again. And I will never let another kid sit in silence while someone else builds a throne from their bones. They thought they'd broken me. All they did was build the stage. And now? Now I'm the one holding the mic.